was actually going to ask you about this later on, but I guess I'll ask you now. How did focusing on politics for you affect your view of raising a family growing up?
Mm.
Because that's something I've always been curious about you. Just
Yeah.
becoming politically aware at an earlier, point in your life, and then carrying that on, and then learning and growing and maturing, and that kind of stuff.
Well, I think starting to focus on politics gained a greater importance because I was just starting a family. So Jimmy Carter was 1979 was running for president against Ford, and I had no idea what, you hear a little bit there, but never paid attention. It's not like we talked about politics in the family when I was growing up. But so I was at work and they said, oh, well, a conservative believes this, a liberal believes that. And you look at the extremes of those if you want. But, the basic tenor of those two groups is X. And so I said, well, being a conservative aligns more with what I believe, economically, socially, and I didn't really care about foreign entanglements at that time. So I said, well, I'm conservative, but I voted for Jimmy Carter, which he is not really a liberal at all. He had the soft side where, he kind of backed off on things he probably should have charged forward on, but that's all water under the bridge. But I heard that he was a Christian, and I thought, well, that counts for more than maybe things I hear that I don't agree with, that he believes. And definitely the Democratic Party, I saw a lot of things that kind of troubled me. So, and then, I think getting back to motivation, the intent of what they're actually trying to accomplish. But it seemed like as long as I was looking at it, and even I remember, the first president I remember being elected was John Kennedy in 1960. And I thought, because everybody's all riled up about the election and Nixon running against Kennedy and seeing that go down. But, I was only 5 at the time. And I thought, oh, okay. And then when he got shot, I showed up at school one day and they said, did you hear the president get shot? I said, why would somebody shoot a president? Strongly held beliefs there, but I didn't understand for a long time.
Yeah.
I was in the 2nd grade. And so, anyway, getting back to kind of, okay, I believe that I'm more on the conservative side, and then start taking a look at politics in depth to make sure that the group that you're supporting is actually somebody that is, the group really aligns with everything they believe. And taking a look at the Bible, this will probably make a lot of people mad. I saw that.
Bringing contention to the discussion, huh?
Well, yeah, let's just liven it up a little bit.
Yeah. We're covering politics. Let's get into religious theology. Let's do it.
And politics at the same time. Is that it really agreed, I saw, with the conservative values more than the liberal values. Socially and economically. Although being generous is good to help people out, and I'm really all for that. It's just not the government's position to give my money to somebody else I disagree with.
Yeah.
That's really troublesome. So when you get into liberal from an economic standpoint and you say, well, it's the right thing to do. And I think there's a role for government. I'm not
You're not a libertarian.
Not a libertarian, which is kind of a funny name for what they believe, but it needs to be done from a private sector standpoint, being generous and giving and providing the needs of the people. But, obviously the government has a role, but it's gotten a little out of hand, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's gotten more than a little out of hand. Yeah, that's the one thing I constantly run into in discourse. It seems like people seem to have this idea that because the Bible commands generosity and kindness towards others, that, then you're a hypocrite if you vote conservative, because conservatives are all about being stingy and mean to people. And it's like, that's such a surface level analysis of
Right.
everything, but of biblical morality in particular. Is like, just because we're commanded to be kind and generous doesn't mean we have to vote for people who are going to promise that the government's going to be kind and generous and then turn around and embezzle our money,
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same Bible that says, give and be generous and give hilariously also says don't steal. So if you're stealing from somebody, so to speak, because they don't agree with it, to give to somebody else, it's taking two values and that are opposition to each other and trying to make it a good thing.
Yeah, robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak.
Right. Never heard that before.
You've never heard that phrase before?
No, I'm teasing.
Okay.
I have.
Okay.
I'm being sarcastic.
See, I couldn't tell.
It's hard to tell
You
by
have such a consistent delivery sometimes.
It's true. It's a weakness of mine.
I don't know if that's a weakness. I don't know.
I definitely have it for sure later on, so. But yeah, I find that interesting, David. Like you constantly see Christianity or those who are Christian be criticized because of that thing. But again, it is such a surface level analysis. There's so much more nuance to pretty much everything in life. And it's funny how people will not look into nuance at certain things like that. It makes me always wonder of the case of, well, this, because you're labeled Republican or Democrat or independent or libertarian, whatever, you have to believe these things. You believe those things, right? But it kind of like a watershed moment for me was during, I think, 2020, during that election cycle, where I was like, no, life is way more nuanced than anything. And to see, to see the kind of turmoil in that year specifically really stood out to me as a time of reevaluating what you believe. A lot of people leaving faith as well as leaving political fields, theologies, ideologies, all the above. And kind of shifting our perspective from what politics were in 2012 to where they were in 2020 to where they are today. But whenever somebody assumes something like that, I can always tell that, well, maybe you should look up a little deeper than that. You should dig a little deeper, per se. So
I like the word shallow.
Shallow
kind of describes the approach that people are taking. But that's one thing I've noticed increasingly over the years. If they can isolate people into groups and put a title on that, they can try to distort the conversation or end the conversation. Okay, I'm right. You're in this group. The discussion's over.
Yeah.
And that's part of the contentiousness that has been kind of ugly. Yeah. It's okay. We're done talking because you're one of those.
Yeah, you're one of those. But I kind of want to go back to that thing of looking at it with more nuance, I guess you could say, because I remember in 2020 following just different creators, and that was also the year where I realized, oh, not everything on the internet you see and read is true. Like I would get recommended things on YouTube and watch them from different creators, subscribe, and then after a little while, you kind of goes back to what we were talking earlier. You kind of see the veil come off of them, or with enough time, or you listen to somebody for a certain amount of time, you will see their true self, and from abundance, the heart and the mouth will speak. And I remember seeing that a lot. And yeah, not to get political, but totally getting political here. But I remember when the whole thing with the last couple of years with Candace Owens leaving the Daily Wire and her spat with Ben Shapiro specifically, I remember seeing that. I was kind of like distraught a little bit because I followed Ben for years, but then I saw his behavior and I was like, I really don't like that at all. And, Candace ain't perfect either, but it's interesting to see the reach that both of these people have, the fan bases as well. But to see that kind of pull back made me reevaluate things.
Mm-hmm.
And again, no, they're both not perfect people, and I don't really follow Ben anymore or don't watch much of Candace either, but I do go every once in a while and see what they're doing. But I kind of lost respect for both of them in a way, seeing that, and especially Ben. I was like really put off by that. I'm like, this is kind of weird, but whatever. I guess I'll go watch Timcast or something, something I was subscribed to.
Right.
But that kind of shift made me realize, again, the nuance of things. The infighting on the right and the left at times, as well as how do you determine that and how does it affect you in your worldview? We want to bring it back to the Bible, but sometimes it's hard to pull exactly the choice you should make politically from the Bible. Sometimes we have our core truths, but how do you translate that to real life sometimes, I guess,
Right.
especially dealing with politics?
Well, I brought up the part about lying, and it's good. Well, it's not good. It's actually terrible to see how effective people are in lying. And there's a Marxist technique where if you say a lie long enough, and you add some attitude and passion to it, and you say it enough, people will eventually believe it. And I think that's where people that realize they're really on the wrong side of an issue, but because they're there, they have to continue on the same track. There's a lot of pride that goes into politics because people have a hard time admitting that they're wrong. And so you get the fact that, that they can't do anything but lie at that point. And I think that's probably the biggest attribute I see with Trump is that he's pretty much an open book. Whether you disagree or agree with any and everything he says, it's pretty transparent. He's not really trying to, say I'm over here, and then when I get to be president, I'm going to do this. It's pretty consistent.
Yeah. And the thing too is like he's not always right about things, but like
Right.
when he says something, even if it's wrong, you don't have to think like, oh, he's trying to like push this idea. He's saying what he thinks, and what he thinks might be wrong or misinformed or whatever on any given topic, but he's saying what he thinks, you
Right.
know? And I think, yeah, it was kind of, I mean, it was a long time in coming. I think there was a lot of dissatisfaction with growing in the political sphere among just normal, everyday, working class kind of people. And people were just getting tired of the games, And you had some glimmers where, it kind of almost broke out into a wider movement. You had the Tea Party, you had the Ron Paul running for president, but those sort of movements kind of were over before they even started, almost.
Right.
And so finally, when Trump got on the scene, it was like people were like, enough is enough. Like, we're tired of all the lies. Here's a guy who actually is being transparent and open. Let's go. Even if we
Right.
don't necessarily agree with everything
Mm-hmm.
he wants to implement, it's a breath of fresh air. And that's one of those things that's really kind of like, it's not even about who Trump is necessarily. It's not about Trump as whether he is the ideal leader or that he embodies the, conservative ethos or not. It's more like he's a rare thing in a politician, and that's almost non-existent, in fact, is that somebody who's willing to engage honestly with people and not try and lie their way into office.
Right. Yeah, we going through McCain and Romney running for president, and you really didn't see much hope in what I would consider more moderate Republicans, because a moderate to me is almost like, I can't make a decision, so I'll be halfway in between, and not for everybody, but that's kind of the way it seems.
Yeah, and it's really funny too. It's like the idea of moderates in American politics is like, it's sort of when people say they're a moderate, they try to like, oh, it's a good thing because I'm unbiased, But
I'm
it's
an
like
independent.
most of American political ideas fit within a pretty narrow sort of range of the political spectrum as a whole. Because we talk about conservatives versus liberals, left versus right, all the time in the context of American politics. But it's like, American politics fits neatly, aside from a few outliers, fits pretty much neatly into what might be called liberalism or classical liberalism. And so conservatives and liberals in the American sense are really two closely related flavors of liberals in terms of like politics in a wider sense. But people like zoom in on that as if Democrats are over here and Republicans are over here. And then people start talking about far left and far right. Not that there isn't far left and far right elements in American politics, but by and large, they're on the fringes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people talk about like Obama as far left, and it's like, Obama was about as far from the far left as you can get. But because we're so zoomed in, we think of these two very closely related things as opposite ends of the extreme. And so people try to straddle the line between that as if they're like, straddle a line between two things that are more or less the same anyway. I mean, we're talking about like differences between definitions of words and stuff like that. That,
Right.
Ideas that are closely related in principle, but differ more in execution. And
Right.
somebody trying to straddle a line between those two things is not what I would call a very principled position.
Right. When I'm having a discussion with somebody about anything, it's and you can see you're not getting anywhere. There's two things that are going on there. One is defining words. Somebody's using a word, okay, that means something to me, and I have no idea what it means to the other person. But and unless actually say, "Hey, what do you mean by what you just said?" Um, and politics is really bad in this sense that they'll use a word that everybody knows, but when they say it, they have their whole ideology behind it. As a, the word is just a cover for what they actually believe. And when they say it in the light of their life worldview. And then when I say it in the context of my view. So it's so often people will use buzzwords or common words to show that they're for people, but unless you know what's behind the scenes, it doesn't really. It's not a fruitful discussion. When somebody's monologuing and giving a speech, a lot of times it might sound good, but if you know what they stand for, it's totally meaningless, and it's very frustrating.